Welcome back to Founder Problems Podcast. I'm Sarah Schumacher, and I spend most of my time clearing caches for CDNs, browsers, and websites while I fix things for website clients.
I'm Lee Zuvanich, and I build apps or help talk people out of building apps.
I'm Zach Ocean Banjo. I'm a grant administrator who dabbles in entrepreneurship.
Cool. So we are going to be talking about rented versus owned platforms. So rented would be a social media platform. You could have a profile on it. It may be free. You might pay for it, but it's not something that you have full control over. An Instagram account, a TikTok account, Facebook, any of these are all rented platforms. There's pros and cons. They're not all good. They're not all bad, but you do need to be mindful about which ones you're choosing and for what purposes. The big thing that is useful for rented platforms is to have a way to connect with other people so that you become top of mind when they think about, I need help with my website, or I need help with my branding, or whatever. I primarily use those as a way of showcasing expertise. Personally, I really only do that on LinkedIn and somewhat on Blue Sky. I am not on any other platforms. And at this point, I don't plan to be. So how do you guys approach these?
I'm most connected to LinkedIn also. It really depends what you're trying to achieve. I think there's certain types of media platforms that curate a certain crowd or whoever you're trying to push your message out to. When I'm on LinkedIn, or when I was, I'd say, more active on LinkedIn, it was an opportunity to connect with people who may not necessarily be near me, because some of the industry and some of the things that I was looking to do was primarily focused around military and defense and things like that. Kansas City, Midwest, is not really strong in that department. You can't really do too much of that outside of DC. So it really offered me an opportunity to do some self-promotion, some self-branding, and really hone in on my identity as I looked for different networking and engagement opportunities.
I probably have a few thousand people following me on LinkedIn now, and I don't know those people for the most part. And it's been really cool to just use that as a platform to share my thoughts and learn from other people in the industry and make industry connections without doing a lot of effort. I haven't had to go to networking events or invest money in tech conferences that cost so much money, and then figure out the whole, well, I'm going to submit a paper and then be brought up on stage as a speaker, and then maybe 5 people will show up to my talk, or maybe 100 people will show up to my talk. But it's this whole process. I have to fly there. On LinkedIn, I can just here's what I was thinking after work today about this thing that happened. And and I reach more people than I would have at a conference doing a talk. And then people reach out immediately and they get feedback and they DM me and they, want to connect and work on projects together. It is so much more dynamic than anything that I could have done on my own, which is why these social media platforms are so powerful and even being regulated by governments, because they have the power to impact elections. That's why we're there. We're there to make those connections in ways we couldn't have on our own little custom built space.
Zach and I were talking about just how exhausting it can be to do in-person networking. And that was kind of the one of the things that we landed on, was like, you can do a lot of networking online. The thing that I enjoy the most are Slack groups, actually. I guess that would be more of a rented platform, or that might be somewhere in the middle.
It totally is a rented platform.
Because you can get kicked out of a Slack group. If you come in there and you're like, I'm going to sell everybody, that's you get kicked out of a Slack. But those are a more curated way of doing the same kind of thing, but within a niche part of an industry. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do online that I think if you're less comfortable doing in-person things, or maybe you have immune system issues and you do not want to be out right now,
right?
The better, it's safer behind a computer screen to, still connect with people.
Totally. Yeah, and somebody is moderating those. And like, for instance, the Slack group that you and I are in for agency owners, there's so thousands and thousands of people in there. And the person that started it and curates it pays for that. And then they try to pass that on in some way or get money back. I got an email recently and they're saying, level up and be in some selective inside groups that we're running and pay to be a part of it. So it does turn into kind of a business of its own. Like Innovate Her KC, that's another example of someone who started a Facebook group and then turned it into something bigger, just based on the momentum that it had.
So, I actually applied to join a paid one.
Ooh.
I think a month ago. Yeah, because it is pretty much 100% my target market in this group. So
Wow.
if nothing else, really, really good market research. So because I already know someone that's in the group. So, but yeah, I mean, I think like that's the thing that like there's a lot of negativity around social media right now, and there should be, because it's not great when a billionaire has control of communications platforms and how to censor whatever they want and do whatever they want with it and not give people what they want. I mean, it was so funny that Blue Sky got big and all of a sudden Instagram's like, oh, we have chronological feeds again. Yeah. Like, never mind the fact people have been asking for that back for years and they did not care. But as soon as there was some
Yeah.
competition, it's like, oh, now we have to give people that one. They don't actually care, right? So there's a lot of frustration around that. And I think that that's a healthy conversation we should have. But if I was a normal person, like I was a normal person, I wouldn't be on any of them. I think a lot of us
That's-
have to be out or feel like we have to be out there for businesses, right?
What's a normal person? A normal non-tech, non-digital
founder,
services person?
Yeah, it could be tech too. I just think like an entrepreneurial person
Yeah.
that's constantly creating and building new things. It is wise to build a personal brand on these platforms, because then if you have people that you can connect with that connect with you, there's people that are listening that are like, oh, cool, I have this new thing I'm working on. So for those of us doing that kind of work, we kind of have to be on these.
Yeah.
I'm saying normal people isn't people that just work a full-time job.
For those people who are working a conventional 9 to 5, that opportunity to use those platforms, you can brand and advertise yourself, I guess, in a new way.
Yeah.
You have so much of a hiring market in the way that the world's going. You can only do so much with 1-2 pages that say your entire life history. So there is that professional element where you can be
That's a good
a
point.
pretty stand-up person, and somebody could be like, oh, that person, based off merely how you engage, if you're helpful and things like that. Because I've also seen it work to the other end, where you could be a jerk online and someone could be like, wow, this guy's super qualified, we want them to come in right now. And then they go back to a post you made like 6 years ago. You're like, so do you really think that? And then you're not going to get the job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a really great point. Career development, especially at the higher level, especially marketers. The personal brand thing is really big. There's one that I followed for years, and I remember when she started working with this other marketer that I really admire. They already knew who they were because they both have such great personal brands. Oh yeah, I would love to work with this person. I think the risks that people need to understand are that it can go away immediately. The whole thing with TikTok that just happened could still happen. If you build millions of people and you're being paid insane sums of money because you have these people that are following you on TikTok, you can lose that tomorrow. And when you lose that tomorrow, you have no recourse. They're just gone. So the strategy that you should be using is to also incorporate an own platform. So an own platform would be something like a website, an email list. Email lists are super important. Potentially, if you do like a self-hosted podcast, maybe a book, I guess, could technically qualify. Anything that you fully own and control, those things are where you ideally want to be driving traffic to. So if you have a following on TikTok or whatever, you should also be pushing those people to your website that you own and control completely, and your email list that you can take to any email marketing provider. Let's say TikTok does get shut down tomorrow. You have everyone on the email list that cares about what you're creating. You can email them all and say, hey, you know what? I'm now on YouTube. Follow me over here. If you don't do that, you have no way of reaching those people. So the strategy is to use both, and to use both in different ways. Own platform wise, my website is what I build websites for a living. So I'm going to beat this horse all day. It is so freaking important. I didn't want to get into like leased platforms here, but I do want to throw out the fact that something like Shopify or Squarespace or Wix or any of those like DIY type platforms, those are technically leased platforms because you are paying for a website on their overarching platform, but you don't actually own that. So if you have a Squarespace website and Squarespace just 10x and goes down tomorrow, your site's gone. You can't pick that up and take it with you. You can't back it up and take it offline if you decide you don't want to, pay for it for a year. It's safer in some ways than a rented platform because you are paying for a service. They have incentive to deliver a service that you want to keep paying for, but it's still not something you fully own. So that's why I'm a big proponent of self-hosted WordPress. There's classic build your own HTML site techie. There's Ghost. There's some other open source platforms. But with these, you typically set them up on your own server. You install and run everything. You own it completely. If you don't like the host that you're with, you pack it up and you move it elsewhere. So it is fully under your control. So I write an email newsletter. I host the email newsletter through my personal website. I host the website myself. I can do anything I want. No one can tell me what I can and cannot do. No one can kick me off the thing. I completely control all of that. So I did not go with a Substack. Substack convenient. I understand if you don't know what you're doing and just want to set something up. It is still a leased platform that you don't fully control. So I did not go that route. very specifically because I want to own and control everything. And also for the IP and stuff, I don't want to be creating content for somebody else's platform that they're making money off of. I don't monetize my newsletter in any way, but if I were to do that, I'm not doing that for some corporation.
I want to say for the people listening right now who are overwhelmed by all the information you just shared,
I
there's
let that happen.
two, there's probably two people right now, two types. That one type is taking notes or trying to remember everything you just said, like, okay, leased versus rented, get a
Yeah.
website, but if it's Wix or WordPress, it could go down tomorrow. So then how do I protect that? Now I got to go research. Well, what if the host site? What about AWS? What about like GoDaddy? What about the people that are
Ooh.
hosting the platform that I purchased a license on? Okay, if all that sounds like gibberish to you, just reach out to Sarah and I. That's what we do for a living, or anyone else you know and trust. There are people who do this for a living for a reason. It takes a lot of time
Mhm.
to understand what the risks are and to just like plow the path forward for you as a business owner that's doing everything else. And of course, there's lots of resources you could teach yourself. But at the end of the day, there's just different levels of risk. So having a whole
Mhm.
career based on your TikTok platform, high risk. Having a WordPress website hosted on a great reputable host, not GoDaddy, but like,
Never GoDaddy. There's also different stages of the journey. So I have a client who I ended up building a website for him, but when he came to me, he had set up his own WordPress.com website. There's actually two types of WordPress. It's very confusing.
yeah.
And one type of WordPress is like Squarespace. It's a lease platform. So he had done that on
Mhm.
his own. I have this project I want to do. I'm going to go out. I'm going to set this account. I'll do it myself. He did it and he realized, you know what? This is a little trickier than I thought it would be. So then he reached out to me, right? So sometimes you have a starting point, and as you learn more, you shift and do something different. Definitely do research in the beginning, but I also don't think it's a bad thing to be like, you know what? I just need to get something online. I'll just start with this.
Oh, well,
There are phases.
I was thinking like Flywheel, that kind of reference.
Oh, hosting companies. That is
Yes,
a whole separate conversation.
right. Going with a host site, going with licensed platform that's reputable, that's been around a long time, like Wix or WordPress. Those are low risk compared to putting your entire career and all of the market validation people are looking for when they Google your name onto one platform, like Facebook or TikTok or Instagram.
Mhm.
So spreading your influence out, spreading your ad spend out across those platforms, getting an email list, that's important. Those are higher risk endeavors. Lower risk would be to get a good reputable host for your website and a web developer, or teach yourself how, but someone who's been around a while, that's not an experimental platform. Although some would say WordPress is getting riskier because of the hijinks being performed by the CEO. And then the lowest risk rented platform out there that you're not hosting by yourself would probably be the whole concept of building an email list and managing it through another platform, CRM of some kind, or email management platform like
Mhm.
HubSpot. And for the nerds who are trying to figure out, well, how do I truly own it? What about owning, which we'll talk about in a minute? Please do not go down the path of getting your own on-site, like on-premise server and putting it in your house.
Is anyone
So
listening to this really going to go that hardcore?
I
Because
I have
that's
been asked about that
hardcore.
so many times, and I've had
Wow.
2 different clients who have had their own on-premise servers and insisted that it made them feel safe. So when you get into app development, and I know people listen to this, like I was saying, there's people who are going down that path. They're thinking, okay, rented versus owned. I'm going to own my own server. I'm going to host it in my garage, and that's going to be foolproof. And then their house floods and they lose everything. And that's not a joke. I've helped people who've gone
Yeah.
through that. So there is a balance. Yes, hosting on
Yeah.
AWS, a rented platform, might be risky in some ways. Like, what if they go down tomorrow? They're not going to. And your server data is being seeded across multiple states. So they have backups on their backups versus you at home with your backup hard drive, and then you have
Mhm.
house fire. So in the digital world,
Okay,
it goes really deep.
so I think that maybe a way we can make this easier for people to understand is ideally your data should be transferable. That's kind
Yes.
of the key, right? It needs to be transferable. I had a client once that had a Squarespace site and they wanted to just shut it down for a while. There's no way to do that. You either pay for your site indefinitely or you just delete it. You can't download a backup and save it
Hmm.
and store it for later. You can't take it to a different platform. It is only a Squarespace site. It can only be on Squarespace. You have to keep paying for it. So
Yeah.
if you do a transferable product, if you build an app or whatever, you put it on AWS, you can move to Google Cloud later, right? Make sure it's in a transferable format. The other email list, that's another good example. Squarespace has built-in email marketing. So if you did have a Squarespace website and you had an email list you're curating, you could export that as a CSV. Just make sure that whatever you're doing, you're thinking about, can I export my data and take it elsewhere? And that's a big conversation that's happening right now, partly because of Blue Sky, because Twitter is so locked down and people have been leaving Twitter like crazy. People are going to Blue Sky. People think Blue Sky is just a Twitter clone. It's not. Blue Sky is a protocol. So it is a fire hose of information that anyone can access the API underneath the Blue Sky, and they can build an app that runs on top of this fire hose of information, which means that if you decide you don't like Blue Sky, you could go to a competing Blue Sky product, but all of your information lives in this fire hose and you can just take it and use it anywhere. And that
I
is
didn't
the
even
model.
realize that. That's
Yeah, I
amazing.
had a whole separate thing I want to write about it because there's so much
Yeah.
more. That's like a decentralized platform. And that is what we should be moving towards, is decentralize everything so that people
Yeah.
own and control their data. And if they don't like what's being done over here, they can take it over here. Because if you're doing that, people are incentivized to make sure that you want to remain on their platform. There's specific people that are still on Twitter because they feel like they need to be because their audiences are there. So if data is transferable, you could leave and you could still communicate with your audience, but from somewhere else. That's getting more technical, but make sure your data is transferable is what I'm getting at.
So I'm someone who's probably been through, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 accelerators. So along that journey, you end up with hundreds and hundreds of people within the cohort, all the mentors, all the advisors, all the people who hop in the classroom and say howdy doody or whatever and keep it moving. So you end up with this long list of people. And I was able to leverage that in some capacity, that I was able to, send a bulk of updates. Hey, this is what I'm doing. Hey, this is what I need. This is what's going on, to a large number of people. And that really kind of speaks to, I own that list of 1,000 people or whatever. And also the other thing that it allowed me to do is stay top of mind, because there was something, if I needed it, I could always just say, boop, right in the inbox, boop, right in the inbox. And it connected me to a lot of different people. The other piece of that I'll talk about is the website. Because for the longest time, I mean, I went on, I don't know, like Fiverr or something like 2, 3, 4 years ago, had some random person make it, I think it was like $50 all in. I paid another $50 to have them slap it up on a web page or something like that. What it allowed me to do in terms of ownership is someone could reference my name, Google Intelligence or whatever I was working on at the time would be pretty high at the list. And they say, what's this SAC guy about? And they would see what I was working on, what I was doing, and why I was doing it very quickly. So I think that speaks to the idea of owning your brand and your identity comes along with that, because I own the email list and I can spam people at will if I desire. And then I also have the website where people can look up what I have going on. And the other point that you mentioned, Sarah, is like being able to transfer that data. And I think this will tie into some other ideas as far as the failure of different programs or platforms to scale. Would be like, you look at something like Vine. So many people like went all in, all in, sell the car, sell the house, to be a Vine celebrity, Vine star, whatever, 6 seconds of sizzle. And then all those people, what happened? Poof, they couldn't do long format content and they couldn't outsource that. Like, if you weren't able to own that, you disappeared. You go from this look or the feel of the big shot, I got it all going on, and then, oh shoot, we're underfunded, we can't keep this going, goodbye. And then you have nothing. So that's the reality of just people not owning or being able to manage their own social presence.
Yeah, well, and that's a good point too, is things do change. So you can't assume that what worked or what has continued to happen so far will continue. It shifts, right? So if you're on Vine and you see the writing on the wall, you better pivot to YouTube quick, right? You do have to pay attention to those things and do some basic research. You will be left behind. I think the other thing I'd throw out is the AI thing right now. SEO is really interesting. Google has gotten so bad. Ads are kind of terrible. And then a lot of searches are being done through AI. So now it's also a question of, okay, if that's shifting, and let's say you have an SEO strategy you've been implementing on your website, is that going to continue working? Or now do you need to figure out, how do you make sure that ChatGPT pulls up your information when people are searching for you? So there's always things happening in the background. We'll see where that goes. I do want to really quickly highlight the pros and cons of both of these. We covered them at a high level, but I think the biggest takeaway that I want people to understand is that there are needs for both. If you have a website, if you build a completely self-hosted WordPress website, it's beautiful, you love it, you launch it, you're so excited, it's got all your information, got your services, how people can schedule discovery, whatever you're doing, whatever you're selling, you've got it. Oh, it's beautiful. Crickets. Okay, you have to market websites. This happens all the time. I have to tell people you have to market.
If I build it, they will come. Isn't that right?
No, it's a myth.
That's what they told me.
Yeah.
Well, maybe like the
No,
90s
it's a
when there
lie.
was like 5 websites. You have to think about that. There are so many websites. There is so much noise. People will not just find your website. So if you build this beautiful platform and you're like, yes, I own all my stuff, I'm going to start writing this newsletter, no one knows you exist. You still have to get people to realize that you exist. This is where the owned platform should be the foundational pillar, but then you can go out and forage around the little social networks to bring people back. It's your main thing. Another thing we probably should have talked about, you need to know what your goals are. If you're targeting business professionals, you probably should be on LinkedIn. So if you have a service that you are selling and you have this beautiful self-hosted website, go showcase your expertise on LinkedIn and then send them back to your website. Find people that resonate with what you're doing to build this group of people that actually care, because it's also better quality leads versus running an ad. These people know who you are. They've been reading your content. I think I'd like working with this person. Send them back to your website. Go find these other places and go, hey, I have this newsletter. Go sign up for my newsletter. And now they have been added to your owned platform, but you're finding them in these other places. So the downside of the rented platforms is that you don't own it, but you can build a following. The downside of the owned platforms is that you own it, but no one's going to know that it's there. So use them together and then be strategic about which one you're prioritizing. First, the other thing with social is followers don't matter. You can have 1 million people on Instagram that follow you. And if it's just because you post like memes they like, they're not going to buy anything. It's a vanity metric. It doesn't mean anything. If you've got 100 people that follow you that are all in your target market and will eventually need your services at some point, so you're staying top of mind, that's better than 10,000 people that don't really care about what you're selling. Just be really strategic about what you're doing.
You need to be able to stimulate your audience on one, which would be the rented, and then be able to quote unquote close them on the own platform. Because there are certain people, like for example, there's this person that I follow on LinkedIn. Her entire business is centered around helping people with business development within the federal contracting space. And so she's constantly posting, constantly commenting on other people's like, well, I'm trying to go after this, I'm trying to do this. And she'll comment and almost provide like pro bono advisement and support. From an outside perspective, you're like, golly, man, she's just giving away all the goods. Like all the information is just right there. Like she should be selling for this. But then there's like almost like this built or inspired trust that happens. Like, oh, they're really helpful. Like they're really helpful. I wonder what they would be able to do if there was some sort of business relationship there. So I think having that opportunity creates, you're seeing them, they're top of mind, like, wow, she's really helpful, really helpful, really helpful. Actually, I need something right now. Let me go find that one person who seemed really helpful. So then it moves over to their website or whatever the medium is for processing that exchange.
Yeah, and if she's active on LinkedIn, then her call to action in her bio is sign up for my email list, schedule a consultation, something like that, driving to the website. People aren't always ready to buy at that moment. When you are ready to buy, I can go to her website and she's got her packages listed and I can just click to book or whatever.
Yeah. And for anyone who is feeling like this is a lot that they have to do all at once for their business, we do have other episodes that cover more in depth, like, is this a good business idea? And that would go deeper into like, is it time to go set up a bunch of social media sites and invest the time and the money into marketing across all these different platforms? Like, that's like so overwhelming for people to do as they are also building a business for the first time. I've honestly probably never done it really well. I like to just seed social media sites with something that shows that I'm alive and drives people to my website, but I don't maintain them very well because social media is a job. That's why you can go hire specialists that do marketing for you. And eventually you'll get to that point, but you need some market validation first. So even just having a presence on those rented platforms, that's all you have to do. You don't have to go really deep into all of these spaces all at once and get everything right. You just do a little bit at a time. And then, when people look up your name, hopefully they'll find at least a little bit of validation and go to your website. Please have a website though.
None of us are good at social media. Lee, I think you're actually pretty good at it because you can just write and throw up something quickly. and
Yeah,
do on
I do
occasion.
just I'm throwing up.
I
I'm just like, "Bleh." Like,
Yeah, I'm not great.
it's
I'm
Always
just I
trying.
love
I'm
throwing
it.
up.
actively trying to get better. Yeah, because
Always be throwing up.
it's that's like a t-shirt
That should
idea.
go on a shirt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right,
Always
hang on.
be
I note that
throwing up.
down.
Yeah.
Failing
Better than
forward.
always be closing is dead. Let it be always be throwing up.
I love
Form
it.
of
Yeah.
productivity, if you think about it. Um,
Well, it's also something that you can cultivate. I will write long form stuff, and writing for social is just very different, right? You need to write
mm,
things in such a way that they're intriguing. You're asking questions and you have short bullets and things. It's a different style of writing. So I do think if you put a little effort into it, you can get better about that and you can make it a low stakes activity. So that's what I'm trying to do. When I have this thing where I just get off a call, I've had to explain this concept for the 5th time to people, I'll just throw up
mhm,
a quick post. Here's a common mistake I see people make. That could be quick and easy if I got in the habit of it. Social media is actually a really great place to get market feedback from people. You could post ideas and talk about stuff and just mess around and see what people come back with and what they're interested in. Because sometimes you're close, but you're not there. And someone will be like, oh, well, that's really interesting, but actually I need this. And then
mhm.
suddenly you have this idea of this thing I wrote is really resonating with the people I think I want to work with, but not in the way that I thought it was. It doesn't
Yeah,
have to be
totally.
high pressure. You can just use it for feedback. Not that I am doing that well either, but I see other people do that very, very well. It's a journey. Just be strategic. That's my advice. You guys have specific things you think stood out to you?
You can't outsource your identity. Hate's a strong word, but I detest a lot of the founderisms that come out of different communities where they say that you have to build in
Mhm.
the open. I don't
Oh,
necessarily
yeah, public.
agree with that
Mhm.
all the way, but I think that
Good.
there is, I mean, you kind of have to be active to a certain degree, whether you're working on some super secret squirrel mission or something, and you don't want a lot of people, you have to talk to someone about it. So that kind of rented platform, that's the utility in that, because you can engage and have a lot of those conversations with people, and then you can, funnel them through the process of whether they want to be a part of it or not. And that would enter into the own space.
It might seem a little confusing to talk about rented versus owned. The way that I think of it, because as I said before, truly nothing that's digital is owned by you unless you get your own server, which is basically a giant hard drive, and just store your stuff on site, which is actually pretty risky and not advisable in this day and
Yeah,
age.
don't do that. None of we're
Don't
advising
do
you not to
that.
do that.
We're not talking about that. So that means you're putting it in the cloud. The cloud is just a bunch of those servers in different areas, but they're managed by professional teams. And then, like, if I put my stuff up on Azure or AWS right now, they are putting it across the country strategically. Like, their business model includes the awareness that if a bomb got dropped on the East Coast, your data is also on the West Coast and in the central part of the United States to even be like ahead of the curve with that. So they're pretty thorough. And that is why we rent forever from the cloud now, which doesn't feel good to any of us that grew up owning our media. But the trade off is someone is managing it and hosting it for you, and you don't have to worry about it taking up space in your house. And then if anything happens to it, all hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of development could be gone. So, first of all, everything ultimately feels like you're renting it. But the way I would put it is it's really like renting an apartment versus buying a house. If you're
Yeah.
building an app, this becomes pretty important. If you're going to spend $100,000 on app development, if you're renting it, basically what that would look like is you're spending a ton of money for developers to put things together on some low code platform. So you don't even own that stuff. It's not hosted by you. They're setting it up on their low code site.
Bubble would be an example of
Bubble,
that.
yeah, which
Yeah.
fuck Bubble. They're
Yeah.
terrible. And we'll have a whole episode about that soon because I've had people come to me escaping how bad Bubble was for them. It might be good for some MVPs, but it's not good for a full-blown app in this day and age. So you can spend an ungodly amount of money on platforms you don't even own and then connecting them to other platforms you don't own, like OpenAI
Mhm.
and, all Stripe and everything else. At the end of the day, you never really owned that code. You just connected it together and you probably overpaid someone to do it. That's rented. And if you're doing it that way, just make sure you're not paying too much money because it really should be like thinking of it as this isn't an investment so much as it's like living in an apartment. And then versus paying a team or paying an individual, or if you're a developer doing it yourself, writing the code and hosting it on Azure or AWS or a similar host site, that's usually going to cost more upfront. So just like paying a mortgage, you might spend 30 years paying a mortgage, but then someday you stop paying that mortgage, you own the house, and you just still have to maintain it and you still have to pay property taxes. So when it comes to building in the tech world, if you believe that you're paying so much money right now because someday you're going to own the code, but you have to maintain code. The libraries will get deprecated, things break, things become insecure, just like you're always being reminded to update your apps and update Windows or whatever you use. Your app has to be updated and has to push updates to your users. And if you don't do that, it becomes easy and vulnerable to exploits from hackers. So you have to maintain it forever, kind of like paying property taxes. You have to, and maintenance, right? Replacing your water heater, all that. That's same in the digital world. You have to do that, and you have to pay hosting costs, which is like paying property tax to the state. So no matter what you do, you're paying someone else is hosting and maintaining it for you most of the time. If you're doing it all yourself, good for you. That's amazing. If you're a developer with a server in your house, you're a radical. But the rest of us, we are doing a little bit of renting, a little bit of owning, and at the end of the day, you got to be strategic and diversify all that time and money across a bunch of different places.
The finance piece did not come up in this conversation at all, because that should be not the least of your concerns, but definitely at the bottom of it. You don't want to be like, well, I want to run a server in my house because it's cheaper. There are some things that are worth paying for. There's a 3-2-1 backup rule. You should have 3 copies of your data on 2 different types of media with 1 copy offsite. So
I love that.
You can't really do that with the server. I mean, I guess you back the server up, but again, the cloud, I love the joke. The cloud is just someone else's computer, but you're paying for a good one. The cloud is lots of other computers and lots of other places. I use Backblaze, highly recommend it. Their sponsor. It auto backs up my computer behind the scenes. Like, I don't have to do anything. It just automatically does it. That is an offsite copy of my files. You also want to use an external drive. You want to keep this stuff backed up. I'm not saying host your own website to save money. Whether or not it costs more or less, it should be a strategic. Yeah, it should be a strategic decision. Like, some things you just have to pay for forever. Like, there is nothing in life that doesn't require maintenance. Right. And ideally, if you're structuring your business well, if this is a business investment, then you're making more money than you're paying on your hosting and your web development and whatever else. You need to factor that in for sure. Don't go buy a website from the most expensive branding agency in the country if you can't afford that. You can't make these decisions solely based on, well, I'm going to get a cheap $3 a month host because I don't want to spend any money. But there are reasons not to do that. That's a whole nother episode.
People at this point in the conversation, typically their eyes are glazed over and they say something like, it's a lot more work than I expected. That's a lot more money than I expected. Yeah. And I mean, yes, it is. That's why I would say go to our other episodes if you need to, because we go more in depth on what makes a business a good idea. Why is your idea such a good idea that now you need to go spend money on a website and not crappy host for that website, and don't use Wix, use WordPress, and all of these things that you need to consider and go educate yourself on. They don't need to be done right now if you haven't validated your concept and the market yet. So don't go do all the things we just talked about if you have not validated your concept with your market. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, don't spend any money. Go educate yourself a little bit on go-to-market strategy and validating your market, your total addressable market. These are things you can do for free. As a founder, you owe it to yourself to do those things first. Once you're ready, you've validated your concept, you know it's going to make you some money. Hopefully it already has made you some money, ideally. Then come back and start to learn about the digital cost side of things and how to get that started.
Frame a listing. I would love to know what we need to break down more in depth, because we could have a whole episode just about hosting, right? I love getting into technical details. I have to really rein it back and try to stay high level. So that's why we're here. If you have questions about any of this stuff, we will break it down. I would be really interested to hear what people want to hear more about specifically, and we'll have an episode on that. So, Zach, do you have any other final thoughts?
I think the main thing is make sure that you have some semblance of control of what you're putting out. I think there's so many different media platforms. There's a lot of different hosting options. You can put up a one-page website that comes up in a couple seconds, or you can take some time, get someone who almost obsessively lives in that type of code structure where they want to build websites. Hint, 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 Sarah, et cetera, et cetera. So like, devote your time towards things that you're actually good at, interested in, and best suited to do. Being able to control the flow and narrative of what you have going on could be relegated to you on a social media perspective, but for other platforms, it might be useful to engage with somebody who lives in this area.
Yeah, set a solid foundation and then build on top of it. Just put some thought into what the foundation will be first, and then work with professionals to get it set up, and then run with it after the research, of course.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that wraps it up for today. Please reach out if you have questions or want us to cover any other specific topics, especially tech related. Lee and I will talk. We will break down tech topics all day long. Oh, I forgot that the podcast itself is a practical example of this. Our owned platform is our website. We share this on LinkedIn, and we will share it on our personal LinkedIn. So that would be our rented platform. We have an email list on our website that we own. We also use a leased platform because the way that we are producing this podcast, that's actually a leased podcast platform. We are not self-hosting the podcast. So we're using all three in this stack for this very podcast. And that's a great example I want to throw out of how that can be done. So listen to the podcast and subscribe, but then also go follow the website, sign up for the email newsletter, and then you can get all of our updates on merch drops and everything else we plan to do in the future.
Awesome.
Awesome.